Good morning, all. You appear to be hopefully signed up and in the correct room. My name is Bill Toon, and I'm with the SAM staff. I'm going to go ahead and turn you over to the co-host, and they're going to take the show from here. Thank you, and for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone who's here. I'm Elizabeth Fernandez. I'm Assistant Program Director at St. John's Riverside up in Yonkers, New York.
I'm Miriam Kulkarni. I'm the Program Director at St. John's Riverside, and we're going to talk to you guys today about dealing with disappointment, specifically career disappointments. The impetus for this talk is that a few years ago, I was in a position where I had a major disappointment in my academic career, which led to a lot of career uncertainty for me and a lot of unhappiness. And I definitely was not alone. I had a great support system. I had several mentors who really spent a lot of time and effort supporting me through this disappointment, but it felt very lonely. And it felt like I was the only person who had to go through a disappointment in their academic career. Our goal in doing this talk today is to normalize disappointments in your academic career and help you anticipate and get through them.
Think about a time in your professional life when things didn't go as you hoped. I think a lot of us can relate to this. I certainly can. It could be a job or a leadership position you wanted but didn't get, a pay increase, or even clinically a poor patient outcome. Were you blindsided by it, or did you see it coming? And how did you feel? Was it lonely, or did you feel like you had a strong support network? How did you deal with it? And do you wish that you had done something different looking back? If you think about this shouldn't be out of the ordinary. Doctors are human, and it's perfectly normal to have bumps in the road, mistakes, disappointments, making plans, and then see that nothing goes according to your plan. But how do you move forward after this happens? If you look at the literature in the business world, failure and disappointment is anticipated and accepted as part of the pathway to success. And in some cases, it's even celebrated. It's not the case in the medical world. We're expected to have the right outcome, to avoid the lawsuit, to catch the diagnosis, to get the high score on the test. They've even created entire conferences that are dedicated to learning from failures. This one is for startups in particular, but we aren't conditioned to accept that as physicians. It's not part of our training. First of all, often the path to medicine is linear. High school, college, medical school, residency. While many people may come by a circuitous route, all of those steps have to be checked off in order to make it. However, our professional careers, once we finish our training, are not necessarily preordained like that. Also, in our medical training, we're trained to get the right diagnosis, to practice the procedures until they're perfect. We don't frequently talk about our mistakes, and when we do, it can feel punitive. This is partially because of the climate of perfect that we've created in medicine, but also by the litigious climate that surrounds us. If we make a mistake, something bad happens. Unfortunately, that mentality has extended to our career decisions. We got into medicine by being top achievers and not by celebrating our mistakes. So it doesn't come naturally to us to talk about them openly. In a 1991 study from JAMA, they found that only 54% of internal medicine house officers discussed a mistake that they made with their attending physicians, and only 24% of them told the families or the patients. House officers who accepted responsibility for the mistake and discussed it were more likely to report constructive changes in practice. But there's been very little research and information out there on how to deal with disappointing things that happen in our professional lives. There is a lot of research on how to deal with burnout. It's a trend, it's a hot topic. We've probably talked about it a bit too much at this point. We talk about how to deal with errors or poor outcomes, but what we don't see is a focus on what to do when your career is a disappointment or something that happens. We don't talk to our trainees about what to do when things don't go according to plan and how to rebound from it. While there is some research on helping physicians anticipate and cope with unexpected or devastating clinical outcomes like patient death or medical errors, there's not a big push towards preparing students, residents, and junior faculty to be resilient in the face of disappointment in their career planning, although faculty development, career planning, and mentorship can certainly help. In a survey of 532 physicians at a single US medical school, 40% were dissatisfied with their career progression, and 40% were considering leaving academics. There are a lot of reasons for this. difficulty with balancing work and family, inability to comment on the performance of their leaders, absence of development programs, lack of recognition of clinical work and teaching in their promotion evaluations, absence of an academic community, and failure of chairs to evaluate academic progress regularly. However, what they're not looking at is how we deal with it, just that people are exiting. We feel a sense of shame because we don't anticipate that we will experience career disappointments, and we feel that we're not doing a good job. So if this is something to be expected, how can we learn to handle it in a way that helps us recover and move forward rather than quitting?
So, our plan for moving forward after a career disappointment, like for example, if you don't get the PD or the APD spot that just opened up, if you don't get offered an academic position in the medical center you always wanted to work at, is 3 steps. The first is to pause and look inward. The second is to reach out. And the third is to move on. So it's really important after you've had a major disappointment in your career to just stop for a second and pause before you make major decisions. Because if you make major decisions in the first flush of that career disappointment, before you've dealt with all the feelings that you might have, you may take actions that you regret later. Most people need some time to mourn, to just feel all the feelings. For most of us, our career is incredibly important to our identity and our sense of self. All of us have invested a tremendous amount to become the successful people that we are. And so when something doesn't go well in our academic or our medical career, it can feel devastating. It's important to give yourself some time to mourn that loss. After you've taken some time to deal with some of those feelings of loss, the next thing to think about is what your priorities are. What's important to you? Where do you find meaning? Where do you find joy in your clinical and academic career? What are your work and non-work priorities? And most importantly, what are your non-negotiables? Like, for example, if you have a significant other who can only find work in the city that you're living in, no matter how wonderful that job is across the country, that's not an option for you. Likewise, if you've looked at your priorities and realized that you really enjoy working in an educational institution with students and residents, no matter how much that purely clinical job pays, it's probably not going to make you happy. Once you've decided what your priorities and your non-negotiables are, then you can start to think about your options and think about whether you can achieve your goals in another role in the institution where you are, or whether you would need to move to another place to achieve your goals. And also, this is a time to take stock and think to yourself about the marketable skills that you have. The next step is to reach out, to seek mentorship and support both inside and outside of medicine. This support can be invaluable, both in terms of emotional support, but also in terms of helping you think about your options and determine your priorities. Sarah Gray lectures on finding a failure friend who you can discuss your clinical failures with, and not just the clinical management, but your feelings around that clinical failure. I'm a big believer in this, but I would suggest that everyone not only needs a clinical failure friend, everyone needs a career failure friend, which might be the same person or it might be a different person. There's 2 critical things about your career failure friend. They must be somebody who you trust, and they must be someone who's going to be honest with you about your shortcomings. We'll come back to that later. After you've mourned, after you've considered and maybe rethought your priorities, after you've discussed things with your failure friends, now is the time to start thinking about your next steps. How can you move on in a way that's going to help you achieve your priorities? Again, reach out to your mentors, network with your colleagues, and come up with a new plan. But most importantly, brush off that disappointment. Try not to spend a ton of time ruminating on what you've lost. Make sure you don't get stuck in disappointment city. No one should be a permanent resident here. It's really important to try to avoid getting stuck in a disappointed, resentful place. Many of us have had that colleague, the person who wanted a leadership role they didn't get, and that ends up grumbling through department meetings or subtly trying to undermine the leadership. Don't be that person. Try to move on in a way that allows you to learn and continue to grow. Once you've chosen a plan, implement it. Remember your priorities. And again, try not to spend a ton of time looking back in your rearview mirror. If you're rebounding from a failure, you can use this opportunity to make yourself stronger. That opportunity to rethink your priorities, most people don't do this when things are going well. So failure can sort of be a blessing in disguise in that it catalyzes that reflection and taking that time to rethink your priorities. It also gives you the opportunity to ask yourself, was there something about me that led to this disappointment? How can I learn from this experience and to make myself better next time? Again, this is where your sounding board, where your mentors, and where your failure friend are critically important. The last thing that you can do to help yourself rebound from this failure is to focus on your areas of strength. There was a study published in Academic Medicine in 2018 that talks about doing this. This is a study that looked at 28 faculty member participants in Canadian medical schools that all had achieved sort of conventional benchmarks of academic success. What they found was that the most resilient physicians analyzed their own contributions to failures, but that they also acknowledged aspects of the situation that were out of their control. And oftentimes they would shift their focus from the area of failure to an area of their life that was going better. One example that they cited was an unsuccessful researcher who decided to focus instead on their clinical work. Obviously, it's the best way to deal with disappointment is to avoid it in the first place. I mean, as we discussed earlier, it's not possible to avoid disappointment entirely. Everybody makes mistakes and everybody has failures. But one thing that's important as you're planning your academic career is to set goals that are realistic. For example, if you're a fourth year medical student, setting a plan to be a program director in 3 years is definitely setting yourself up for disappointment. Another way to avoid disappointment in your academic career is to keep open communication with your bosses and your colleagues. Become an expert in feedback, and not just in giving feedback, but in receiving feedback. If you ask for feedback early and often, if you accept constructive criticism gracefully, that is definitely a way to set yourself up for success as opposed to disappointment in your academic career. Another really important way to help yourself avoid disappointment is transparency. It's really important that you fully understand the expectations of your institution, of your chair, and the others who you report to. Ask questions. This is especially important when you're starting in a new workplace. And again, two-way communication is important. So be upfront about your goals and ambitions. If you yearn to have a role in the residency as, a program director in APD, be upfront with the people who are in those roles so that they can mentor you and help you find opportunities for learning and growth so you can set yourself up for success. The other thing that can really help you overcome a career disappointment is making use of your network. It's really important in your career, even in the times when things are going well, to take care of the people you meet along the way and to invest in those relationships. If you do that, those relationships will be there when you need them. Mentorship, support, helping you find new job opportunities, having a strong network can be invaluable when you're going through a difficult time in your career. Michael Jordan, speaking about his NBA career, once said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Failure is normal. Disappointment is normal, and you are not alone. Try to see failure as an opportunity to rethink your priorities and reassess your strengths. Remember to use your failure friend and the others in your network who are your sounding boards. It took me time to recover from the career disappointment that was the inspiration for this talk. But I'm ultimately happier in my career and a stronger physician and teacher because of it. So when disappointment happens in your career, hopefully this talk will have given you some tools to help you be resilient. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope that you'll stick around and share any questions that you might have. We'd love to hear from you guys.
I just wanted to thank you about this, about putting this talk together. It's really helpful, really informative. And I think in the times of COVID, I'm an intern. It was challenging to connect even with my co-interns, with my senior residents, with my faculty, and to really be able to share those bumps that we had in the road. So had to really look up my own ways of getting the load off my chest, I guess, and found some friendship in my previous colleagues in medical school or in other cities right now, but it was still very helpful to get together after failures and discuss it.
Thank
you so
you.
much for sharing that. It's really, I mean, you're almost finished being an intern, but I absolutely think it's really important to keep in mind that internship is hard for every single person. It definitely was hard for me. There were lots of times when, I was in EM1 and I just felt like I was, it's hard. It's an exponential learning year. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad you found some support.
I was wondering, I'm Lynn Rapole, I'm from UT Southwestern, and excellent talk. I think this is something that all of us have experienced in different forms. I was wondering if you had heard of anything related to resilience committees. So we have wellness committees, but I was just wondering if there was an extension of that, because I think all of us invariably at some time in our careers might have a disappointing, not just career situation, but also just like a medical error. It's a third leading cause of death, unfortunately, and it's very common. And if you had come across anything like that.
So I actually have come across, some work on kind of looking at what factors kind of lead to resilience in residents, and it's it's unfortunate because a lot of it is not, it's kind of not stuff that's in our power to bits, like, whether they have a strong family support system and, things about their values. And it's hard for me as a program. I can't change that as a program director. I definitely think that that's definitely something that needs to be looked into in terms of how we can foster resilience in trainees, and how not just in trainees, but also in faculty members, right? Because it's a huge problem in our specialty in particular, and in medicine as a whole. So that's definitely, I think, an area of growth for the future.
Yeah, I was just
I want
thinking
to add
like
something to that.
would get that outcome or something like that.
Sorry, it's a little hard to hear what you were saying. Your mic broke up.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was saying, if you have medical error, you feel horrible. You're like, I'm the worst doctor in the world, and then your program director or your chair be, oh, you got to go to the resilience committee. These are people who have gone through this. Not everybody, because I think we are in a world where everybody's so smart and seems like so perfect, but we all have these situations. So I was just wondering, just to have kind of like a little more structured outlet if you had come across anything like that.
I have not, but I think that's a fantastic idea. Like maybe we should have our own FailCon, like the business world does. I think that would be a tremendous idea.
I mean, the thing is, a big part of this is I don't think anybody thinks about that. Like it's such a, high school, college, med school, residency, like these are the things that you have to do, check the boxes. And because things fall into place with all of those, we just expect that the career things will too. And it just doesn't work that way. I mean, you're interacting with lots of other humans, and there are human errors and human interactions, and these things are just super complicated. But I certainly wasn't ready for some of the things that I came across. Learned a lot retrospectively, but the hard way, I think.
Well, this might be an opportunity for collaboration. So I think we're
That's a tremendous idea.
yes. Well, maybe I'll reach out to you.
Absolutely.
So,
Sure.
but anyway, well, thank you both. That was excellent, and I'm sure everybody here benefited from it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys so much. I'm actually putting my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me. I think we're like out of time.
Yes. No,
Yes,
I
you, the session has officially come to an end. So thank you all for being here and continue to have a great conference. Well, yeah, I know that the staff appreciates everyone that's here participating.